PCSX2, the PlayStation 2 emulator, just released their first full stable release in 5 years, version 2.0, and it comes with a ton of updates, and it's now an incredibly good point to start getting into PS2 emulation. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through setting it all up for the first time, customizing it, getting everything tuned just right, so that it can basically just be a software game console on your system. I'm a huge PS2 fan myself. I have a massive PS2 library. I'm always trying to grow it. It's one of my favorite consoles of all time, if not my actual favorite. And yet I still like playing around on here as well. So go to PCSX2.net and click latest stable and download either the installer or the zip for your preferred operating system. It does run on Mac now with the latest update, as well as Linux, of course. But we're going to be doing it on Windows here. I can do some demonstrations on Mac and Linux if you all need, but it's basically the same. I am actually going to do, because I like keeping portable apps going, I'm going to do the download instead of the installer. The installer works like any other Windows installer where you just run it, but I am actually going to do the download because I like keeping a portable programs folder here in my user folder in Windows. That way it's super easy to back up and move between computers. So I'm going to make a new folder in my user folder, programs. I'm going to make PCSX2. And then we're going to extract this with an archive manager or explorer. I prefer using 7-zip. Go ahead and just extract to the PCSX2 folder here. And you can delete the .7z file. And we are going to run PCSX2. It's PCSX2-qt.exe. I'm going to go ahead and right-click, show more options. You don't need to do that on Windows 11. And pin this to my taskbar so I can always run it super easy whenever I need to. Right here. And I'm going to click to run it. Now, before we even run it, you may want to make some folders in your PCSX2 folder. Since we're doing a portable here, or if you just want it in one place, I'm going to make one for BIOS because we're going to need a PS2 BIOS. And I'm going to make one for mem cards. You can make a games folder too, but since the games take up a lot of space, I actually have mine on a separate drive here. I've been ripping my disks and compressing them, and we're going to talk about compressing them in a few minutes. All right, so here you choose your language, which I'm going to do English. You can also choose a theme. It comes with a lot of different themes. Pizza time, if you like ugly. You've got white and blue, red and purple, blue and purple, black and red. All sorts of cool, or just like custom Windows XP looking, or classic Windows XP looking. I am a fan of the Violet Angel myself. You can choose to enable automatic updates or not. This is primarily only going to be for the stable release updates, so I wouldn't worry about it too much, but if you don't want it ever updating without your explicit consent, you could uncheck that. I'm going to hit next, and then you need to find your BIOS directory. Again, I made a folder for that in the PCSX2 folder and dropped in some BIOS I have ripped. I will have a video on ripping these in time. I'm going to choose the USA one since that's the version I want to play with for now. And then you can add some games folders, assuming you have started ripping your games. I have a guide up on ripping PS1 games. I will have one on PS2, although it's basically the same process coming soon. But I have here on my external storage a PS2 folder. And this supports a bunch of different formats now. You've got normal ISOs and BenQ files, but you've also got compressed CHDs and ZSOs. Now, there's a couple programs to do this. I will show this later in the video, but the difference is astounding. Like, just as a quick example, I've already compressed some. Which one was it? Right here. So, ATV Off-Road Fury 2, the ISO file, which is just the standard disk rip, is 4.382 gigabytes. The compressed file is 1.14 gigabytes. That is a massive difference. And if you run this on your whole ISO folder, I still keep a backup of the originals just in case, because you never know. But holy cow, you save a lot of space here. So I'm going to go ahead and add my directory, which is down here, PS2, select folder. Do you want to scan recursively? This is going to, if you have your folders like nested, folders inside of folders, it will scan those. I'm not doing that, so I'm going to say no. Save a little bit of time. Next, controller setup. All right, so you have to have your controller plugged in for this to work at the moment, but you can emulate a guitar, the Pop-In Music controller, or a DualShock 2, and you got 2 ports for it. I'm going to have DualShock 2 registered in the first one, and automatic mapping, I'm going to use X input controller because I have an Xbox controller plugged in because I like being contrarian. Next, ready to go. Going to launch and load your games. And look at it go. Now, once it has loaded your games, you should have a nice list here. And the view is already really impressive. You get some really neat stuff here that I'm looking forward to finally like utilizing to their full potential. Because obviously this is part of why I want it in a portable folder that I can move between computers, because there is time played tracking. You can track how long you've played each game, which is really cool. And they have achievements, which you can lock in as well. But if you reinstall it on different computers and don't move your existing copy over and that kind of thing, then you end up losing that data. So I am going to definitely start keeping this consistent and tracking it. You can sort your games by regions. You can sort whether they're PS1, PS2 games or ELFs, which are like homebrew apps. It shows the region that the game is, the size of the ROM, the name of it, and the code, of course, as well as compatibility with PCSX2, which most of them are going to be at least 4 stars at this point. And if we sort by compatibility, there's a couple that don't have any rating for some reason, and then a single 5-star in the games that I have copied over, which is Neo Contra. Now, I am going to show you how to get your cover art, because this list is cool, but if you want it to look like Dolphin or like running it on a game console, you can change your view mode here. You've got the list view, the icon view, and then you can change the size of the icons once you switch. So if we switch to icon view, we can now make them bigger and have a little cover art display. But that's kind of boring when they're just listed by names here. So, tools, cover downloader. Now, PCSX2 as the emulator cannot do this because hosting all of those game covers would be a copyright concern, but the open source community has supported this. Before we're going to do that, we're going to go over to settings. Actually, we're going to go to system settings, folders. And for me personally, by default, it's going to store all of PCSX2's stuff in your documents folder, which if you installed it normally, it's fine. If you want to keep the portable version like I do, I'm going to browse and I'm going to move these to my portable folder, because that's just going to cause problems to have it in different places. So this one's cache, and we're going to make a cheats, and we're going to make one for covers, and this is specifically why I wanted to make it, because I wanted to make sure we had the covers moving with my install. Snapshots, we definitely want that, and then save states, we definitely want that in with everything else. So make sure those are there, that way we know where the covers are downloading. So tools, cover downloader, and then you're going to want to go to this GitHub page. This is PS2 covers. I will have it linked in the description, and it has instructions both for doing it has a standalone app that you can download them yourself, or now that PCSX2 supports it here, you just copy these URLs. So I'm going to copy this one first for 3D covers, but not every game has a 3D cover. So I'm going to copy that one first as the primary one, and then copy this one second as the secondary. Now, you will have to copy these URLs every time you run this, unfortunately. It does not save it. That's a big annoyance of mine, as I wish it could auto-download and save, but whatever, that's fine. Every time you add new games, you'll want to do this. And then you click Start. And it's going to go through, scan the GitHub, and pull the cover images for your games. And like I said, if you put the 3D one first, it will prioritize those over the 2D. And then whatever games did not get a 3D cover will get a 2D cover, which is great. And I'll show you what those look like here in just a sec. And boom. You can see here, for some reason, Tomb Raider Angel of Darkness does not get one of these 3D case-style covers. But you still get the cover there, which is all that matters. So if you don't like the differences, then you can just use the 2D ones, but I think I like prioritizing it. And then, like I said, you can adjust your size here. We can go ahead and maximize this. And you have them in a nice little list. This also plays nicely with another new update, the big picture mode. Just like in Steam, you can now launch this in full screen big picture mode, and having the carousel of covers definitely helps the vibes for that. So if we do that, it gives you a big high res display. We can full screen it, and then you can control it with your controller. So I can say, okay, game list. And now I get to navigate this, which is great if you have a console hooked up to your TV, or you're just trying to emulate having OPL or whatever and just kind of, doing this as if it were a real console. It's kind of cool. Like, I really love this. We're going to go ahead and back out of this for now, but I think it's just a cool way to display and engage with your game library. Now, of course, these are sorted kind of strangely. So now let's take another look at some ways to customize your view. In the view menu here, you have some toolbars. So you can go ahead and bring up this menu if you want some easy buttons instead of right-clicking or whatever. So you got start file, start disk, You can just start the BIOS and launch into the PS2 itself. Big picture mode. Controls once you're in the system. Save states, full screen, settings, controller mapping. You can lock it, because otherwise you can kind of move it and reposition it here, which is kind of nice, and then you can lock it in place. Can get verbose statuses, which I think are going to give you extra status text at the bottom should it be necessary. You've got your list, your grid. You can zoom in, zoom out. You can refresh your covers. Interestingly, there doesn't seem to be a sorting order, which is kind of annoying. I don't know what's up with that. Probably not the biggest priority, but it's something I would definitely look into at some point. All right, we're going to dive through some more settings. So I'm going to go to System, Settings. There's a lot of cool stuff in here. For example, you can have it save state your game on shutdown in case you experience crashes or you're in a place where power isn't super consistent or whatever. You can have it just save state, so every time you close it, you're ready to pick back up where you leave off. That way you don't have to remember it and everything. You can have it automatically start games in full screen, which I definitely want. Hide cursor in full screen, definitely want that, so that's not showing up in my captures or whatever. Enable Discord presence. This allows it to show that you're playing the emulator and what game you're playing in Discord, which is really freaking cool. I love that. We're absolutely turning that on. Have it automatically pause if your controller disconnects. Here you can add your game directories, and you can exclude directories if for whatever reason you got a bunch of mixed files. Prefer English titles, absolutely, in case you have it somehow loading alternate language versions of games. We already looked at BIOS directory. All right, these are the emulation settings. We're not going to look too much at these yet because PCSX2 now ships with the best settings for every game. So previously you had to go through the wiki and you'd have to like pick out the community voted best settings for each game or whatever. The emulator now automatically configures that, assuming you're wanting to run at native res, which is great. And you can control some of that here. By default, it's going to be on automatic for renderer, which is just the way it renders, the graphics engine it renders your game with. So DirectX, OpenGL, Vulkan. Vulkan's going to be the most cross-compatible across operating systems, so that's going to be great for Mac and for Linux. DirectX is probably what it's going to prefer for Windows, and then if you have multiple graphics cards, you can choose them here. It's not going to apply to most people. Automatic will work fine as well. Here you have options you can choose for your aspect ratios. So if you want to start running games in widescreen, you can force them with that. We'll also show some other things that we need to control for widescreen play in a moment. You can try to force the aspect ratio of FMVs, cutscenes, cinematics, full motion videos. I necessarily would not mess with that by default. Deinterlacing. This is a big one. This is a really big one. In the nightly updates and leading up to this with this update, they finally introduced adaptive deinterlacing, motion adaptive deinterlacing. Now, I have a whole chunk of my RetroTink and other scalar reviews talking about what this is, but typically when a lot of PS2 games are rendered in what's called interlacing, where the alternate fields, which is just basically every other line, are rendered separately and then combined together. And on a CRT display, an old school tube TV, you don't notice it. On modern displays and software rendering, you can see the lines and the ways to manage them here. Weave will show you the lines. Bob will just bop the frame up and down, which can be annoying to see. Blend will blend them together, which gets kind of ghosty. Whereas Motion Adaptive tries to adapt all of the content of the frame into one stable image. You'll still see some artifacts sometimes, and it really sucks. And I hope we get to a point where every game has very clean progressive scan patches. But in the meantime, Motion Adaptive, I believe bottom field first is what we want. Yeah, so top field first is used for HDV video, for like HD tape cameras, but for standard NTSC signals, bottom field first is correct. And then you get option for screenshots. So we're gonna do internal resolution. We definitely want that. And PNG is fine. We want, the quality option is gonna be for JPEGs. PNG is just gonna be uncompressed. But you want internal resolution most likely, which is just gonna be the game's rendered resolution. Now here's some fun stuff. You can automatically apply widescreen patches and no interlacing patches to games them just in general, right here in the engine. You don't have to manage it on a per game level, which is wonderful. Oh, integer scaling is right there. Yes. Okay. I thought I saw it mentioned, but this is just for bilinear filtering. That's fine. Integer scaling is absolutely what you want right here. Gives you the crispest, sharpest, cleanest upscales of your video from your game. Most of these you don't really need to mess with. Anti-blur is on by default. That's great. Now, the reason it says can cause some issues for the widescreen and interlacing patches is some of them will mention you need overclocks, and I don't know that that happens automatically, but you will have to manage a little bit case-by-case basis. If we go into rendering, this is where you would change to render games at higher resolution. Now, I need to clarify here. You can make the game's output and your full monitor size no matter what. So, by default, I do kind of recommend running everything at the native resolution here. This will make it the most accurate to the original console without any weird scale, texture warping or model skewing or anything like that. But then it will upscale using this sharp upscaling and everything to your 4K HD whatever monitor. If you want to start rendering things at higher resolution and tweaking that, you can do so, but I would recommend doing that probably on a case-by-case basis per game because each game is going to respond a little differently. You got further graphics controls here for like texture filtering and everything. Personally, I'm going to by default leave this on native. You also have the ability to dump textures from games and then load up replacement ones. So the scene is about to explode for AI upscaled game textures because as long as you're not, mucking up things and making them look funky, a lot of games, especially if you do increase the render res, can start looking really, really nice with upscaled textures. And I'll try to show some examples of that at some point in this video. So you have the option to dump them, which is just going to dump all the game textures as you play. And then after you've done that, you can run it through Topaz or some other AI upscaler and then load them back in. And this is going to be the folder where it wants to load those from. So you're going to have to navigate that and put them in a per game folder or something like that. Post-processing, you can use AMD's contrast adaptive sharpening if you want. I'm going to leave it off by default, as well as FXAA anti-aliasing. These we can play with at some point. Maybe we'll do a whole separate video experimenting with post-processing. If you'd like that, let me know in the comments, as well as CRT shaders and things like that, which could look pretty nice. On-screen display stuff, you can show FPS, CPU usage, frame times. I'm actually going to turn these on so we can take a look at this while we're playing. And then recording. This is huge. Now, by default, you're going to have really crappy video recording here, and it's not going to be super great. Like, it's just not going to look great. But if we close this and close PCSX2, and then we go to the link that PCSX2 devs provided to a GitHub to get the version of FFmpeg that they want, you download this .7-zip file, and you extract it to your PCSX2 folder. So in my PCSX2 folder here, we're going to just open this. You don't even need to download it. You can just open it in temporary files and just drag all of these straight into here. They can't distribute it with the emulator because it's open source software and there's weird licensing, legal restrictions, whatever. But then do that and relaunch the emulator. Go back to graphics settings and recording. You now have codec options, and you can choose any available codec that FFmpeg supports. FFmpeg is a huge command line utility for encoding, decoding, manipulating, recording any sort of video file. And it's going to show you every codec that FFmpeg supports, which is a problem because your graphics card won't necessarily support it. Like, for example, I'm on an NVIDIA card, but it shows Intel and AMD encoders as well. And if you're on an older graphics card, you don't have the AV1 encoder that NVIDIA has. You can only do that on RTX 40 series cards. So gotta be careful here. Broadly speaking, every graphics card that most people are going to be using these days has an H.264 and HEVC encoder. HEVC is higher fidelity than H.264 and just as compatible. So like NVIDIA users by default, I recommend using HEVC. And then we're going to bump up that bitrate, especially if you're playing in HD or 4K. I'm going to say at least 50 megabits per second. We're going to do auto resolution based on our window. And then same thing with audio codec. we're going to do wave. So we want, actually WAV is not supported in the MP4 container here, so we're going to do MOV instead. And then we get 32-bit float uncompressed PCM wave audio. And then the bitrate for that does not matter, but I'm going to do 1024 just in case. And then you can choose where it saves videos. So I'm actually going to move this to my captures folder, and I'm going to make a PCSX2 folder within that. And our recordings are going to go there. And we're going to experiment with that too, because that should be pretty exciting. And I'll be able to use the AV1 encoder on my RTX 4080 here that we have. So that's graphics, audio. You got some options here. Again, I don't necessarily recommend messing with these much unless you have a reason to. You're following a specific guide that has been updated for version 2, keep in mind. Otherwise, just leave it alone. Memory cards. You're going to want to make a memory cards folder, as we did. And you can either import and manage your memory cards like we did in my PS1 memory card video. I'll have that link below. Or we can just make one. PCSX2 underscore MC1. And by default, it's going to be the normal 8 megabyte memory card that Sony's typically provided. But you could also make bigger ones. Just keep in mind, a lot of games won't necessarily support it. However, you can just make it a folder. You don't even need to use the memory card files anymore. You can just use a folder. And then you have the individual saves. So we're going to do that for slot 1. And then we're going to do the same thing for slot 2. And we're just gonna drag 1 there and drag 2 there. Good to go. And if you have imported memory cards that you download from the internet or whatever, you can put them in this folder you made for your memory cards and then hit refresh and it will find them. So if you download saves from the internet, if you backed up your real PS2 memory cards, whatever, you can use them all here. Incredible. You can enable networking and the hard drive emulation if you want. I don't see the point of that when you have direct access to the ROMs, but if you want to experiment with stuff or the couple games that use a hard drive on a PS2, you can. And then achievements. This is another huge thing that will get me using emulators more. As stupid as I want to say that it is, it's kind of neat. And I guess it won't necessarily get me using emulators more, but it will get me more well adjusted to keeping track of my emulator progress. Between time played and retro achievements here, which is a service that supports a bunch of different emulators, I love this. So enable achievements turns it on. Encore mode will act as if, like, keep showing it every time you unlock an achievement as if you haven't unlocked it before, just to show when it would happen in a game. You can experiment with unofficial achievements that aren't tracked by retro achievements, but like the community has submitted. You've got hardcore mode, which is a challenge mode on retro achievements, as well as spectator mode that you can see them, as well as spectator mode, which doesn't actually unlock any and send them to the servers, which I feel like you just disable it at that point, but you have the option. All right, then you can control the amount of time that the notification for them shows up. I'm going to say 8 seconds for achievements. I don't really care about leaderboards. I'm going to say no sound effects in case I'm doing a Let's Play or something, and then you need to make an account at Retro Achievements and log in. So I'm going to do that real quick. I've not actually done this yet. Actually, I do have an account. That's exciting. Okay, so then I log in. Username. You got to trust them with your password, but that's fine. Hardcore mode allows you to set times, scores, and participate in leaderboards, but it prevents the usage of save states, cheats, and slowdown. No, I don't. That's fine. I don't care about that. I want to be as completely flexible. Cool. So we are logged in. We can now track achievements. Very cool. So that, broadly speaking, is the setup. Now, thankfully, the new update for PCSX2 allows you to manage individual per game settings. So say one game you happen to know from the wiki. Let's go ahead and pull that up. If you're going to be playing PS2 games this way, I highly recommend keeping this bookmarked. It's a wonderful resource that shows you what games are playable, how to set it up, as well as individual settings for specific games. So let's say I want to play Champions of Norath. I can find the page for it. It shows tests that people have run to confirm that it works on the emulator. Confirmed playable on Windows, unknown on other operating systems. Perhaps I can contribute that at some point. A history of the issues being fixed in the emulator itself. It gives you some deinterlacing patches for it. But all of this is kind of built in now. We see here some tests on Windows. It tells you some of the results if you need things to work. There was at some point a bug in hardware mode fixed by rendering it in software mode, but that's no longer needed with the Vulkan renderer. So hopefully everything works out here. We're going to find the game in our library, which, again, I'm not entirely sure what's up with the ordering of this. Maybe it's by, like, game code instead of name. I would really like a sorting option here. I'm not quite sure why they would do it this way. But I can search. I guess that would be the benefit to this view, because we can sort by title. So Champions of Norath. I'm going to go over here, right-click it, and go to Properties. You can also manually load save states. You can exclude it from a list. You can manually set cover images, which is great if you bring in like ROM hacks or modded games or custom games. You'll want to be able to set your own custom images, which I will have to do for some other ROM hacks I'll show you in a future video. But we're going to go to properties. You can change the name, change the type. You can view compatibility. It's reported as playable. All that kind of stuff. And then broadly speaking, you get the entire PCSX2 settings menu here, but it's saved on a per game basis. So anything you change here will override the normal PCSX2 settings and save it specifically for this game. So we now have a patches menu here, and you can see here there is a widescreen patch and a no interlacing patch. What I'm curious is two things. I want to confirm that because I already set to apply these in the emulator settings, it will do it automatically. And the next thing I want to check is the no interlacing patch for this game seemingly requires a specific overclock in the emulation settings, which is not applied here. So we're going to run the game first. You can see here we jump to full screen, no achievements and retro achievements. We got our overlay. We are running in widescreen. It says 2 game patches are active, so it did automatically run that without me having to manually configure it, although you may still want to check that for the compatibility stuff, like I said. We have no saves, so we're going to have to make a new save real quick here. I do wish I had backed up my console saves to make this easier. The game is running pretty smooth to my eye. Looks like it's reporting 60 frames per second here. The game does not have any sort of widescreen or progressive scan modes in the game, which is unfortunate, but that's okay. You can see it does report in the top right corner. Can I get a... No, my cursor's gone. In the top right corner, it reports that it's running in interlaced. And so we are running native res here. So I'm going to make a new save file. You can see here we get the overlays telling us our memory card is being updated. We can start a new save game. Normal game. 1 player. We're going to do courageous. Oh, we don't even have a... You need a character to do that. I'm used to just continuing my endless save files. You can see here it is running in Vulkan by default for the renderer, which is great. If you don't know what that means, just know that it's good. We got all the cutscenes. I'm not worried about it right now. Everything appears to be running smoothly here. Oh, you can see here we are getting some combing artifacts still, even though the no interlacing patch is running. Actually, yeah, the no interlace patch is running, but it's still running in interlace. So that is unfortunate. A Dark Elf Shadow Knight. Yes. Actually, that would be more magey, but that's fine. Yes, we're going to do that. Absolutely. Of course, I don't have a clue what the best specs for any given character are here. That should be fine. We're not min-maxing. We're just doing this as a test. And we have made our character. But the fact that it's still running in interlace does present us with a troubleshooting step we can try to make. I can't guarantee that we will fix it, but this is a good opportunity for that. I do want to get to a point that we can save so we don't have to go through this every time. All right, we're here. Let's see here. The game was chugging for a little bit there as it's loading stuff. This is a game that could absolutely benefit from some better render settings. And we are getting a little bit of frame fluctuation as was reported for this patch in the first place. But you can see here, this is a game with a ton of texture detail and interlacing. So it starts to look kind of funky. All right, we can now save our game. Great. And it automatically has the year correct. The time is not. We may need to mess with that. All right, so to exit, we can just hit escape, and that brings up the menu. And we got this whole big menu here. We can go to settings. There is a quick switch to software renderer, which is great as a troubleshooting thing, but we absolutely should not need anymore. I love this overlay. This is very console-like. I love it so much. You even have a change disk menu for games that need it. Screenshot is available right here. I wish recording was available here. That is unfortunate that it's not. Hopefully it can be added. We can do lots of settings here. I don't know why Discord presence turned back off. But we have all the usual options here. R1 moves over. Maybe it's still showing as interlacing because we turned on deinterlacing. So I'm going to say no deinterlacing. And you can see here we have those patches manually applied. So now I'm going to go back, resume game. It still shows it rendering as interlaced. It looks fine to my eye. I'm not getting interlacing artifacts, so we don't need to have that turned on. All right. But regardless, I am not sure how you'd pull up that menu without the escape key on the keyboard. regardless, I do want to start changing some settings. So actually, we were in the system settings. We were not in the game-specific settings. So if we turn on those here, I want to see if that changes anything. Set it like that. Yeah, I'm surprised the big screen overlay menu does not have the new recording thing. I really want to encourage them to turn it on. We're going to leave everything else alone for the moment and go back to our game. We may have to relaunch the game. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to hit escape. I'm going to say... Looks like we don't have options to just reset, so I'm going to close game. Exit and save state. And then we're just going to double-click to relaunch back into it. Load state. And it is still showing as rendering interlace. So either that doesn't report right with the patch or whatever. But I'm not seeing any combing artifacts. And in fact, the texture on the ground here actually looks a lot better. So I think we're doing fine at the moment. I'm going to pull that menu back up. We're going to go to properties. And I am going to go to emulation settings. Can we change graphics settings here? I don't think we can. Oh, here we go. Internal resolution. We're going to bump this up. We're going to say we want to run it at full HD. Okay, by linear filtering, we're going to leave that alone. I don't know why it resets where we are every time. That's really annoying. We're going to turn up anisotropic filtering. Dithering is fine. That's fine. That's fine. We're going to say load full textures to help prevent some stutter, and that's probably fine. Holy crap, it's like we jumped in the future. Look at that. We're now rendering the game at 1920 by 1341, which is the correct resolution for the aspect ratio we're at here. Our character model looks incredible. The ground geometry, or like the environment geometry here looks great. The flame effects look awesome. The textures are still kind of but we could also, again, we could upscale those. I may do that. I may have it dump some of the textures for this game, and we can see how it looks. But by just changing that one setting for this game, things are looking a lot better. Now, for now, we could just leave it as is. If we start discovering that it looks wrong, then we can go back and turn it back off. I am going to push it a little further while we're here. So I'm going to go all the way over to graphics, and we're going to change that internal resolution. I'm playing on a 4K monitor. We're going to go for it. How does performance hold up? Okay, you'll notice the menus start breaking a lot more. There's some weird lines in the rendering of the menus and stuff. That is something you might want to avoid. It breaks my immersion a lot. A lot of UI elements break when you start scaling internal resolution for games. So I would personally not play like this. And frankly, at this point, like, performance seems totally fine, but like the difference is negligible enough. I don't really see the point. Like, I would absolutely just turn it back down to HD. So we're going to go back over. Menu still does look a little broken. It's not as broken. I'm curious if that would apply to 2X. We're going to go over, game properties. Internal res, we're going to do 2X native. Yeah, there's still that line there. That would bug me personally, but it's not a menu you see often. There are some games that have like big text elements. Like, you can see the one on my level in the top left corner is a little funky, and the level for the goblins right there is a little funky. I don't like that. So games that have a lot more of that, it would be a little more bothersome. I think we can bump it up to HD, and it's probably fine. Because again, you just want it looking nice enough that it's still fun to play, but it doesn't need to be too nice that it looks like uncanny or you start to see the flaws elsewhere, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, this looks really nice. I'm going to go ahead and save again here. Not that I'm going to continue this playthrough, but I do want to investigate the system time next. So I'm going to go ahead and hit escape. We're going to close the game. Exit without saving. Actually, your memory card is writing data. Okay, yeah, definitely don't shut down while that's happening. Even though it's just a folder, like, better safe than sorry. Exit and save state. All right, So there's some I could investigate there with the deinterlacing and stuff. I am going to dump textures at some point and start upscaling that, but the problem with that and why you don't see a ton of full replacement packs yet is that it requires going through the entire game to get every texture and like every nook and cranny. So you can't just dump the whole game's worth of textures, unfortunately. But we're doing pretty good so far. I do want to show you how to save some space by compressing your games. So I'm going to go ahead and close the emulator. There's a couple different tools you could use for this. The first is from the PSX Plays forums. It's a PSX ISO to ZSO converter, because I was looking into using ZSO files. And if I go to that, it is a neat tool, and I'm glad it exists. But it's very Spartan. It's very old school. And you can only do one file at a time, which is really annoying. And then it always saves it as new.zso in the folder that the game is in, or that the program is in. So then you have to rename it every time. It is way too time intensive. So instead, I recommend grabbing CHD Manager or CHD Man. The best copy I can find is on Internet Archive. I don't know what happened to the original creator or where it's supposed to be hosted, or if they just went straight to archive first, which is great if so. But you download the 7-zip from this and extract it. And similar deal of it being a portable program here. You got some bat files. You want chdman.exe and then the qgdi iso.bat. You want to copy that into your ISO folder. And then you run the .bat file, and it will go through in every Q, ISO, or whatever file in here, and it will compress them and put it next to it. And so I've been moving my ISOs out so I can show you like the size difference, but I've already done a few here. And you can see here, like I mentioned, ATV Off-Road Fury 2, the default ISO rip was 4.382 gigabytes. The compressed version, 1.14 gigabytes. If we go for a smaller one, like Gradius 5, which is a BinQ format, 455 megabytes, and the compressed version is 312 megabytes. Less space saved on the smaller files, but the big ones, you're looking at almost half of the file size, which can save you a ton. Like right now, my PS2 directory is 385 gigabytes. So I'm going to show you what that looks like after I've compressed it all here, but it uses up a ton of CPU power, so I couldn't get it done in time for this video, but I'll show you there. All right, I've downloaded a texture patch for Crash, the Wrath of Cortex here, and enabled texture loading in PCSX2. And by default, you're not really going to notice it because I'm still rendering at native resolution, but I just wanted to, to get it loaded up here. So I'm going to go into game properties, go over to graphics, and we're going to change internal res to HD. Immediately, the text is looking way better. Look how crisp these look. So I'm going to get us into some gameplay and do a save state, and I'll do a before and after for you here real quick. But look how crisp those letters are at the top. Remember when Crash did not have this much loading? All right, so I'm going to save state. We're going to look at him. We're going to look at the ground. And I'm going to save state and turn off the textures. I don't know how noticeable this is here, but we'll have a little bit of a before and after. You got to find the specific textures. I've seen some that do a lot of work. There's a whole forum group in the GBA temp forums of people making HD texture packs and stuff for PCSX2. A lot of them need updated for the new version, so keep that in mind, but I'll post a link to that in the description below as well. So lastly, I want to cover recording your gameplay. I talked about setting up FFmpeg so you can record natively in there. I do, again, wish that overlay menu had a record button, but we're going to load up a game and try to record some. What game do I think would get me in the quickest? Honestly, at this point, I don't know. Probably Crash. So if you double click to not run the game in full screen, then you have your normal controls here. So again, you only have screenshot here. They really need to add recording, but if I go to set tools, video capture, you can turn it on in the tools menu. I'm gonna go ahead and load into a level here. So now I'm gonna toggle on video capture. It's gonna ask me where to save, Crash Bandicoot Wrath of Cortex. It automatically names it based on the game. That's incredible. I'm gonna click save. And then we have an indicator in our overlay here that it's recording. So if I go full screen, is that gonna keep going? It is, perfect. You can see here, we do have some render errors as a result of our patches. So this is a game that maybe you need to troubleshoot that for, or just not use it. Although this is looking fine. It's like certain effects, transparencies. Oh, there is a transparency bug with the HD textures. in the new update. So maybe this pack needs fixed for that. That may very well be the case. So I'm recording, doing my thing. We got a recording status in the top right. Yeah, this texture pack definitely needs updated for the new version. But for the purists out there, like, this kind of brokenness is specifically why I recommend setting your default emulation settings to just run things at native res. Because, like, personally, stuff being broken just makes it feel like I'm playing an emulator and not a game console or whatever. And I would want to just run it native if that's the way it's going to look the best. And so in situations where things cannot run kind of perfectly, that is what I would choose. And so having it be that way by default kind of helps with that. I missed the mask there, but that's okay. But you get the idea. So now I'm going to unfull screen it and stop my recording. And we're going to go check on it. Confirm with media info. It did in fact record HEVC at about 50 megabits per second. And we got PCM audio uncompressed. So it should look pretty good. And indeed it does, free of compression artifacts. Lots of ghosting from the emulation, but looks pretty solid, all things considered. And it is in the render resolution of the game, which I think is incredible, because that means I can blow it up to my full monitor screen, whatever, but it's only encoding the resolution the game rendered at, which to me is important for, like, accuracy. I love that. You can change that if you want. I showed you how to do that. So ultimately, I think it's in a great spot, especially with the big picture mode, the overlay controls. My wish list is a bit more polished with the patches, because there's some lack of clarity with some of it. I would like the recording menu, like if there's an overclock needed for an interlacing patch, then that needs to be automatically applied. Cheats at the moment seem to be, like, they're supposed to be auto-supplied with the .pnach files, and I'm not seeing any of that anywhere. So that needs to be worked out a little bit, and I think the recording button needs to be added to the overlay, to the big picture mode, to the controller menu there, to the sidebar, all of that. And this is like a TV-ready experience for me if those things get fixed. It's really nice. I am super stoked for this. I think this is a completely valid way to play your PlayStation 2 games. If you don't want to keep up with hardware and scalers and whatever, or yours have died, you just want to back up your games, whatever, like, this looks like a perfect experience. And if I wasn't so knee-deep in hardware at this point, this would just be how I played. Like, it really would, especially with the time tracking, the retro achievements. Like, I'm pretty stoked. An annoyance I'm discovering is that if you run a game in 4x3 mode, for example, the Burnout game here does not have a widescreen patch. Even when I go full screen, it does not appear to fill my screen. And I've messed with a bunch of different settings. That's really bizarre. But Burnout is a game I wanted to feature here because they have fixed the sky with it. This is one game that for the longest time had a black sky, and they have completely fixed it. It, an Aliens game, and a Ratchet & Clank game all got some really nice features here. It's looking pretty good. Like I said, it doesn't support widescreen, but yeah, this looks really nice compared to the empty black void that the screen had before. Wow, that first place is going so freaking fast. I hope this was helpful to you. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know your experiences so far with emulation in general, with this emulator, if you plan on using it, whatever, in the comments below. I'm very curious to hear it. But yeah, let me know in the comments, and yeah, go check out my other preservation videos for backing up your memory cards, your games and stuff, and let me know which ones you want to see as well. And remember to be kind, rewind.